She was 19 years old when her own father put her up for auction, not as an animal, not as a slave, but as a commodity. The girl, whose name wasn't even important, changed hands for $26. The buyer was a lonely widower who earned just enough at the mine to survive. This is a story of how something beautiful can be born in the most terrible circumstances, and how one person's decision can forever change the destiny of another. The story began in 1883 in a deserted small settlement in the state of Colorado. At 19, Sarah McBride had already been through all the bitterness of growing up. Her father, Patrick McBride, was a drunkard and a gambler who spent more on whiskey than he earned. Her mother, Margaret, was sick and spent months in bed, slowly dying of tuberculosis. The family's debts had piled up so much that Patrick could no longer pay the rent for their small shack. Loan sharks knocked on the door more and more often, threatening to take everything they owned. For Patrick, there was only one way out: selling his daughter. One Saturday, Patrick McBride brought Sarah to the town square. He put her on a wooden platform and started shouting to passers-by, "A young, strong girl for sale, knows how to cook, clean, work. She can be yours for $25. Shame and humiliation were visible on Sarah's face. Her eyes were full of tears, but she didn't cry. She knew her father would beat her if she did. The townspeople surrounded them. Some snickered, others shook their heads disapprovingly, but no one said a word. Then appeared Thomas Reid, a 45-year-old widower who had lost his wife during an epidemic 6 months earlier. Thomas was not a rich man. He worked in the nearest silver mine and struggled to earn every cent. He was lonely and desperate, but when he saw Sarah on that platform, something in him changed. Thomas knew it was wrong. He knew that a person should not be sold like a piece of beef. Nevertheless, he stepped closer and asked Patrick McBride what was the minimum he would take for her. Patrick immediately replied, $26, not a cent less. Thomas looked at Sarah's face. The girl looked at him, and in her eyes he saw a desperation he had never seen on a human face. Thomas knew that if he didn't do something right now, this girl would be lost. He took out his wallet and counted out $26. These were all his savings he had accumulated over 2 years. He gave the money to Patrick McBride, who immediately put it in his pocket. "The girl is yours," Patrick said, and without a word to his daughter, he left for the bar. Thomas and Sarah were left alone in the town square. The man didn't know what to say. Finally, he simply asked, "What is your name?" "Sarah," the girl quietly replied. "Sarah, I'm Thomas. I know this is a very strange situation for both of us right now, but I want you to know that I didn't buy you for the reasons others might think." Sarah lifted her head and looked Thomas in the eyes. For the first time in many years, she saw warmth in the gaze of an adult man. Thomas took Sarah to his small house on the edge of town. It was a simple but clean place. "This house is your home now, too," Thomas said. "You have a separate room where you can sleep. No one will harm you here." Sarah didn't understand. "But you bought me." Thomas sat down at the table and looked at her seriously. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. No one can own another person. What your father did was terrible. But I gave that money not to buy you. I did it to rescue you from this situation." "So I'm free?" Sarah asked uncertainly. "You are completely free. If you want to leave here tomorrow, you can leave. If you want to stay, you can stay. If you want to work, work. If not, then no. It is your decision." Thomas taught Sarah to read and write. In the evenings, they sat at the table by the lamplight, and Thomas patiently showed her the letters. Sarah was smart and learned quickly. Within a few weeks, she could already read simple sentences, but the biggest change occurred in Sarah's heart. For the first time in many years, she felt important to someone. Thomas never yelled at her, never hit her, never humiliated her. Instead, he spoke to her as if she were his equal. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. For the first time in many years, she felt safe. When she got up the next morning, Thomas was already gone. He had left for work in the mine. A note was waiting for her on the table. Breakfast is on the stove. If you need anything, ask the neighbors. Thomas. Sarah decided to stay, not because she was obligated to, but because she felt Thomas was sincere with her. Over the following week, Sarah gradually discovered a completely new world. Thomas returned from work every evening, and they talked. Thomas told her about the town, the people, the world, and Sarah slowly learned to laugh again. One evening, Sarah asked Thomas, "Why did you do this for me? Why did you save me?" Thomas was silent for a long time, then replied, "Because when my wife died, I thought my life would never have meaning again. But when I saw you on that platform, I realized there was something I could do. I could help someone." "But I'm not your wife," Sarah said. "No, you're not. And I don't want you to be until you want it yourself. But if one day you decide you want to be, I will be the happiest man in the world." Sarah touched Thomas's hand. "I think I already want that now." By spring, Sarah had completely changed. From a timid, broken girl, she had turned into a confident, happy woman. And Thomas realized that he could no longer live without Sarah. One April evening, Thomas asked for Sarah's hand. Not like others do it, but as befits two equal partners. "Sarah, I would like you to be my wife, but only if you want it too." Sarah replied, "Yes." Their wedding was simple. The town priest married them in the small church. A few neighbors attended as witnesses. Sarah was dressed in a white dress that Thomas had bought for her. It was the first new dress she had ever received. But the real turning point in the story came only after this. A few months after the wedding, Patrick McBride returned to town, drunk, angry, and broke. When he found out that Sarah had married Thomas, he flew into a rage. One evening, Patrick burst into Thomas's house. Sarah was home alone. Patrick began to scream, "You little wretch! How dare you marry without my permission?" Sarah was no longer afraid of him. "You sold me, father. You have no rights over me." Patrick became furious and tried to strike Sarah, but at that moment, Thomas walked in the door. He saw what was happening and grabbed Patrick's arm with one swift motion. "Get out of here," Thomas said quietly, but in a tone that was worth more than any scream. Patrick tried to object, but Thomas was stronger. He threw Patrick out of the house and told him, "If I see you here one more time, I will call the sheriff." Patrick McBride never bothered them again. Sarah and Thomas lived happily. Sarah became pregnant, and the following spring, their first child, a girl, was born. They named her Mary, in memory of Thomas's late wife. But the most powerful moment came when Sarah held her child for the first time. It was then that she truly understood the difference between love and ownership. She would never sell this child. She would never put him up for sale. This child would be free and able to make his own decisions in life. Thomas and Sarah raised 4 more children. They taught all of them to read and write. They taught all of them that all people are equal and no one can own another person. In old age, Sarah often recalled the day her father sold her. She thought it was the end of the world then, but in reality, it was the beginning of her new life. Thomas died at the age of 77 in Sarah's arms. His last words were, "Thank you for making me happy." Sarah lived for 10 more years without Thomas. Her grandchildren often visited her and always asked her to tell them the story of how their grandfather saved her. Sarah always ended the story with the same words, "Love is not when someone buys you. Love is when someone sets you free." In the last days of her life, Sarah still whispered Thomas's name. On her tombstone was written, "She was free and freed others." But perhaps the most surprising thing in this whole story is that Patrick McBride, who once sold his daughter, died homeless in another town at the end of his life. No one mourned him. No one remembered him, while the love of Sarah and Thomas still lives on in those people who have heard this story and learned the lesson from it that true love always liberates, it never imprisons.